Intel's new fix for their 13th and 14th gen CPUs isn't a fix at all. Massive deception here, and if you've already had crashes, well, your CPU is damaged forever. Plus, it affects more CPUs than you think. This is a huge issue, so I actually wanted to do a dedicated video here, and if one of your friends or anyone that you know owns one of these CPUs, I definitely suggest you send them this video. With that, let's just get right into this. So if you saw my recent video, you know that I discussed the fact that Intel finally released a statement about the instability issues with their 13th and 14th gen CPUs. Well, there's some major issues with that statement, but before I get to those, I'm going to go ahead and reread it. So as you can see right here, it says, based on extensive analysis of Intel Core 13, 14th gen desktop processors returned to us due to instability issues, we have determined that elevated operating voltage is causing instability issues in some 13, 14th gen desktop processors. Our analysis of returned processors confirms that the elevated operating voltage is stemming from a microcode algorithm resulting in incorrect voltage requests to the processor. Intel is delivering a microcode patch which addresses the root cause. So notice that the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages. We are continuing validation to ensure that scenarios of instability reported to Intel regarding its Core 13, 14th gen desktop processors are addressed. Intel is currently targeting mid-August for patch release to partners following full validation. Then they end it with this, which I sort of thought this was odd, but I'll get to this part in a minute. It says Intel is committed to making this right with our customers, and we continue asking any customers currently experiencing instability issue on their Intel Core 13, 14th gen desktop processors, reach out to Intel customer support for further assistance. So you know what Intel had to say, so let's talk about why at least some of this is complete crap. Starting things off, we have a news story from Igor's lab, who in the past has definitely been someone who gets really deep into stories and kind of finds stuff that a lot of people don't, as well as a very trustworthy leaker. And when you hear leaker, don't worry, because some of what I'm going to be discussing has already been completely confirmed by Intel themselves, so this isn't all just some leak or anything like that, but I did want to start with this. As you can see, it says what Intel didn't write on Reddit, but thinks internally. Basically, Igor's lab got a hold of some internal discussions that Intel has been having when it comes to their problems with their CPUs. And like I said, I'm going to confirm the overarching kind of theme here, but this story was posted first and then the confirmations came after, which really tells me that this is almost certainly correct. Either way, starting things off, so right now this is basically a bunch of bullet points of Intel discussing things and discussing some of the problems. And first up, we have this where it says Intel observes a significant increase to minimum operating voltage across multiple cores on returned affected processors from customers. This increase is apparently similar in outcome to parts subjected to elevated voltage and temperature conditions for reliability testing, meaning this is something that's having a big impact on these CPUs. And then I'm going to talk about this, which a lot of people have been seeing. I've been seeing some comments where people are saying, oh, well, this isn't even Intel's fault. This is board manufacturers who are putting stuff in that makes it go way higher. This is overclockers, all of that. But you're wrong. Like I've said in the past, motherboard vendors have put stuff in their motherboards that basically does wild overclocking, wild voltages, things like that. But typically within the CPU itself, it only allows it to go so high. So this is nothing to do with users. It has nothing to do with motherboard manufacturers. This is strictly on Intel, especially when you look at this. If this part does end up being true, it says even under idle conditions at relatively cool temperatures, sporadic elevated voltages are observed when the processor is resumed from low power state in order to service background operations before entering a low power state again. Basically, even when your CPU is like asleep or at a very low power state, but there's still some background tasks that it needs to do ever so often, when it switches from that low power state to handle those background tasks, it elevates the voltage quite a bit even there. So this is not just when you're gaming or doing extreme stuff that really takes a lot out of the CPU. Next, he says, at a sufficient high voltage, these short duration events can accumulate over time, contributing to the increase in minimum operating voltage. So Intel's analysis indicates a need to reduce maximum voltage requested by the processor in order to reduce or eliminate accumulated exposure to voltages, which ultimately result in that increased minimum operating voltage. And this right here is where things get wild. It says, while Intel has confirmed elevated voltages impact the increase in Vmin, investigation continues in order to fully understand root cause and address other potential aspects of this issue. Meaning, it's not the only cause. Yet, if you remember, when you go back, it says, well, our analysis of return processors confirms that the elevated operating voltage is caused by a microcode algorithm resulting in incorrect voltage requests of the processor. Intel is delivering a microcode patch which addresses the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages. Now, I really kind of read this quite a bit to fully get it, and this is why it's so unbelievably deceptive. It makes it sound like, oh, they're fixing the root cause, which is elevated voltages. But no, they're addressing the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages. What is the root cause of the exposure? Oh, well, it's elevated voltages. So they're fixing elevated voltages by not letting them go higher. But then also here, they make it pretty clear. They confirm that this is stemming from this. Well, this isn't the only thing. Oh, and you thought that it had to do with some algorithm? Well, according to this, Intel is actually what they're doing is they're just updating the limit requests above 1.55 volts. Meaning if what I'm understanding here is correct, all they're doing is just limiting those really quick jumps. They're not actually stopping the calls. They're just stopping them from getting too high. Seems like they really don't know the cause. And this is where things get even worse, because in a pretty amazing new article by The Verge, who spoke with Intel, it's not good. First up, as you can see right here, it says Intel confirms too high voltages aren't the only reason some of these chips are failing. Intel spokesperson Thomas Hannaford confirms it's a primary cause, not the primary cause, but the company is still investigating. So yeah, that seems to be a load of crap, but it gets even worse. Like I mentioned earlier about this part, about Intel is committed to making this right with our customers, and we continue asking any customers currently experiencing instability issues to reach out to Intel customer support for further assistance. Most people, when they read that, at least I know I did, you're likely thinking that Intel's just going to say, oh, well, the fix is this microcode update. Well, no. That's not why they say that. Now, they absolutely should have mentioned this, but of course they want to replace as little of these CPUs as they can. And the reason I say replace is because, as you can see here, if your 13th or 14th gen Intel Core processor is already crashing, that patch won't fix it. And the reason for that is because it's damaged, it's done, it's kaput. This doesn't fix it because it's already messed up. Meaning, for anyone who's using these CPUs, and once again, as we saw, if this one from Igor's lab is correct, this can happen even when it's in idle conditions. But if you're using your CPU, you could be damaging it right now. As you can see right here, further down, Tom's Hardware reports that any degradation of the processor is irreversible. And an Intel spokesperson did not deny that when they asked. Meaning, this is not a fix for people who are having issues. This is a fix so people who don't already have issues won't in the future. Which begs the question, why has Intel not stopped selling them? Luckily, this is asked, although I don't even believe they give any kind of answer. You can see right here, these are some of their really good questions. Will Intel recall these chips? Yeah, they definitely should, given the fact that, especially for anyone who's had it for any length of time, you're doing damage to it. Now, they sort of try to pretend that you're not, but I don't really see how that could even possibly be the case. I mean, this is to the point where I would suggest if you have one of these CPUs, just turn your computer off, at least until that microcode update comes out. Though, as what's already been confirmed, that may not be the only problem. So yeah, will Intel recall these chips? Will they extend their warranty? Will they replace them? No questions asked. Will they pause sales like AMD just did with Ryzen 9000? So yeah, let's get to some of these questions and answers. How many chips does Intel estimate are likely to be irreversibly impacted by these issues? Well, according to them, it's not just the 13900K and 14900K. Apparently, it's any 13th and 14th gen desktop processors with 65 watt or higher base power, meaning it's multiple CPUs, not just the K models and not even just the i9 models. And once again, these are basically being damaged as you're using them. The next question, will Intel issue a recall? No. So just no. Has Intel halted sales and or performed any channel inventory recalls while it validates the update? No. And they're apparently not going to. Then they asked, does Intel anticipate the fix will be effective for chips that have already been in service but are not yet experiencing symptoms, meaning invisible degradation? Are those CPUs just living on borrowed time? So which Intel says Intel is confident that the microcode patch will be an effective preventative solution for processors already in service. Though validation continues to ensure that scenarios of instability reported to Intel regarding its 13th, 14th gen desktop processors are addressed, meaning they don't really know. And given the next question is, will Intel extend its warranty on their 13th and 14th gen parts and for how long? No answer. So at least they didn't directly say no, but if they don't extend that, that could mean that these are slowly damaged during this time period, and then your CPU just goes kaput right after the warranty's over, even though it's a defective issue from Intel. Then it says, given how difficult this issue was for Intel to pin down, what proof will customers need to share to obtain an RMA? No answer. They then ask, will replacement RMA chips ship with the microcode update pre-applied beginning in August? They basically say yes, that is the case. Then they ask, what can customers do to slow or stop degradation ahead of the microcode update? Intel recommends that users adhere to Intel default settings on their desktop processors along with ensuring their BIOS is up to date. Yet, they are confirming that this is not going to fix the issue. So they're basically saying, yeah, keep using them, even though you could be degrading them. Finally, they say, will Intel share specific manufacturing dates and serial number ranges for the oxidized processors so mission critical businesses can selectively rip and replace? Intel will continue working with its customers on V-oxidation related reports and ensure that so no, they're not. They're just going to hope that it breaks after the warranty and they probably won't replace it. One reason why I'm pretty confident about that is because this right here, Alder Games, he actually said, any idea on why we had server providers who ran into faulty CPUs in 2023 get rejected around the time you mentioned the oxidation manufacturing issue? After 2 years of being handed rejected RMAs, contacting customer support again and hoping to not get rejected again is getting quite annoying. Basically, according to this game studio, some of their CPUs that were within that manufacturing time frame that they didn't really tell us, just said early 2023, but apparently their RMAs were rejected. Basically, Intel doesn't actually know everything that's going on that's causing this. I can almost guarantee that the reason they went ahead and released a statement is because of the massive pressure that they had on them, not to mention the fact that Ryzen 9000 is right around the corner. Yes, they did delay it, but Intel released a statement before AMD announced their delay, so tons of pressure to announce some kind of fix, even though they don't really know what's actually going on. It really sounds like they're dealing with this the same way they dealt with their Raptor Lake CPUs, releasing them before they were ready.